Oh my goodness.
Got this printed
Oh my
out.
goodness.
This is,
Oh my goodness.
You might recognize that little name right there.
Oh yes. Oh yes. That machine was deadly. Well, the whole concept was deadly. It was deadly. Like, that was deadly. That some of those scenes, man. Some of those scenes, deadly. Deadly. Having, like, you know, one of the best parts of science fiction, like, always like Terminator movies, right?
Mhm.
And you know, RoboCop, and there's this thing about, like, when I read your book, you have that image of it just as this total complete killing machine that is just slaughtering, just laying waste, right? And it's such a badass, like, concept. And when Haas, who's badass himself, has that like that epic battle at the end, man, like, oh man, that on the ship, it was wild. It was wild.
Run it by me.
The whole book was wild. The whole book was, dude, it's your book is off the hook. I'm like, seriously, I was like, I knew it'd be good, but I was really, really, really impressed. And I think the one thing about the book that really got me is, like, you had that whole, you know, initial, like, vibe where it was more like a Stand By Me vibe, and okay, young kids, you know, like, it started off so innocuous, right? You know, one kid just wants to be popular, wants to go to a popular party, blah blah, wants to go with a girl, you know, gets his wheels, you know, goes out, you know, whatever, okay, blah, gets into a crash, hooks up with the next kid, and they already had them their POV separately. And one kid was, you know, more of, okay, he's a bit of a nerd, he's, you know, boss is an idiot, you know, blah blah. Like, it was just, it started off so just innocuous, right? And you're thinking, it's great. The writing was fantastic. And I knew, obviously, from reading the prologue that wasn't the way it was going to wind up. Like, this is obviously, you're showing their rise to power and how they came together, right?
Yeah.
But, like, it started off so, like, you get that more, like, Ready Player One vibe, or that Stand By Me vibe, or that just whole, like, really, like, exceptional writing, but just you wouldn't have known where it was gonna go. Like, if you say there was no prologue, you would, like, you wouldn't have, there was no way you would have known there was this going, right? So it was wild. It was wild. And then the whole thing, you know, the whole vibe again, like, okay, typical teenager type thing. They're gonna experiment with some drugs. They're gonna do this, you know, they're gonna party, blah blah blah, right? You see, like, what I love about it is that when you show the backgrounds of the characters, so one is like, okay, if you compare them, right? So one, basically single mother, blah blah. The other one, family's really tight, jokey. You know, dad's a real character, loves to, you know, like, joke around, and, you know, but really warm and loving. It just, he built all that stuff up. So for me, it made it that much more powerful when you ripped everything apart, right? So, dude, it was. It was amazing, man. It was exceptional. Like, I really, I could go on and on. Like, the highlights, like, I loved what you did specifically. If there's one thing that really, everything stands out. So I know that doesn't make sense, but the one thing that really got to me, what you do, the one concept of thing you did with your book that really got to me is, like, well, sorry, back up. There's two things. The first one is what you do with Haas, because you basically killed him off twice. Like, the genius was, like, I was like, oh my goodness, this guy's a genius. Like, because you had him killed off in the whole lead up. Okay, they're still young. They're desperately trying to save themselves. They're trying to save society, blah blah. And then you kill him off. But then, you know, later on, right, way later, after the rise to power is complete and they're in the two separate camps, and he comes back, right, to have him lift away again, right? But then to bring him back as, like, it was wild. It was wild. It's like, it's just, I can't believe it still. I had to, but you messed me up. Well, not you messed me up. I messed myself up because I had to go back because what happened to me was that, so I was totally sold from the prologue. The prologue was like, okay, I know this is gonna be off the hook, right? But they went there and said, okay, well, maybe it's a bit long. That was my only actual criticism of the book. But that was before I realized.
Shorten it a little bit.
Yeah, but that was before who I realized the prologue was about, right? Because when you confuse the two main characters, so that was on me, that wasn't on you. Something like, so then at the end, I'm thinking, wait a minute. Because I thought, okay, wait a minute, but this, so then this is where he was a bit, but no, it's not him. So that really messed me up. Like, that was kind of like, but that was my fault. It's because I guess I was, at that point, I was so like, oh my gosh, I'm so into it. I was reading so fast. And usually I really absorb things carefully, but I was so into your book. It was that page turning moment. I was like, boom, boom. I was like, okay, well, no, it's not, right? So, but that was wild. And then I think because you didn't, so you kind of, and I'm assuming that book 2 is going to cover this. So, because you only got to a certain point in the rise to power, like you only documented basically from just before things started going really awry, rather than how they got there. Like, how do you hook up with her, and how did this happen, right? You know, like there's elements that I can see that book 2, I'm sure, is gonna set up. But yeah, man, it was just like I was like, wow, brother can write. Like, you can really write. And the feelings, the exploration of the feelings and what's in the character's head, and just the prose, and just, dude, yeah, man, hats off to you, man. You can write, bro. You can write. You can write. I could go on, but you can write. I'm rambling, but sorry.
Oh,
but you can write.
no. This is phenomenal. This is everything
you can write, man. You can write, brother. You can really write. You got mad skills, man. You can really write.
Thank you.
Really write.
Did you find it funny as well?
Yeah, but you know what though? And that's a good point you list. There's parts that were funny, but it's almost like if you ask me, was the book humorous? Just me personally, I would say it's fun. There's funny, witty parts, but it wasn't like that humorous. I was much more into the overarching serious tone of like, this is effed up. You know what I mean? Like, shit is effed up. Like, you know, like you're kidnapping adults, you're cloning them. Like, I was more caught up in the serious sci-fi elements of the whole thing, and it was funny. Of course, it was humorous. Like, especially with the whole, like, they're kids, right? Basically, right? So of course there's the angst, the hormonal angst and all that stuff. That was all funny. It was all hilarious, right? And even just the relationships and then the banter, right, was all great. And you know, and of course when you have a badass dictator, when he's just riding his people, he's just riding them, he's just roasting them every second get, right, cutting them up about being incompetent all the time, and you know, blah blah, right? And he's hilarious. But I think, like I said, like you asked me, now, of course it was funny. Of course it was funny parts, but I was caught up in the drama, man, and the scope. It was just, you know, like that was wild. Like it was wild. It was wild. I really, dude, man, I thoroughly enjoyed this book, man. This book was wild. You're an awesome writer. You know, I wasn't prepared, I think, for just how awesome it would be. Like, you know, because and it was funny too, because I read, you know, it's not fair to say, I have to leave names out of it, but like, so I read a couple months ago, so I read a friend's book who's writes, and he did sci-fi, and you know, his book was really good, and it was really good, a lot of elements, but it didn't flow. Like, some parts just didn't flow, and that was my stomach. But like the research he did was amazing, and the action was pretty good, and you know, a lot of things, but it just seemed kind of choppy in some ways. It didn't quite flow. Like your book, even though, and this is the thing, like your book jumped POVs way more than his book. Like, you were back and forth at some points during the book. Not the whole thing, but some points. But I never lost track of what was what, and that's a key for me, because to be honest with you, I don't even prefer those multiple POV things. I'm a man that I'm old, and I'm stuck in my ways, and I love first person. I love first person, just one character's viewpoint throughout. I know it's limited, and that would be a criticism of my book, but I can't lie to you, I love those books. But with your book, I had no issue like keeping up. It's like, you know, you read Game of Thrones, and they, for example, I know it's not sci-fi, but I'm just using it as an example because it's easy. So they obviously go through multiple POVs. like every chapter is somebody different. But and there's times when I had a hard time keeping up with that. Even me, like, and I'm pretty good with that stuff. Just like, okay, well, who was speaking last chapter, and who is this person again? And but you didn't do that because none of your like, there's no minor characters with POV, right? Which makes it really easy, right? Because it's essentially about two dudes. Like that's and they're separate, opposing rise, right? So like that was yeah, man, it was outstanding. It was outstanding. Yeah,
So,
it was great, man.
My question for you is, from your point of view, what is Sergeant Zay, like SGTXE?
Yeah.
What is that creature? And also, how did you feel about the Haz's like sword elements? Like his whole ability that like because but by the way, just as a precursor, the book I'm working on right now that will be released hopefully by the end of the year is Iris of Mercy, which is the point of view of Haz and Alice during the basically to fill in the holes of what happened during Allegory of the End.
Okay, so perfect. That makes sense.
So everything that like while he was away, his whole like death, like basically the very first chapter that I already wrote is him basically seeing his own funeral, where he's behind the kids, after they break through the wall and they're like into the whole like desert scene and they start walking and whatnot. Paz is like right behind them, but he's just like infinitely far away and can't like really like call out to them and whatnot. So he eventually ends like dying of dehydration. Then he wakes up, and then like the story can like it kind of like goes on from there, and that's where he learns all the stuff with the swords and the martial arts and all that crazy stuff, all the training and everything.
Oh man, dude, I love, because the thing is, when you have sci-fi but you combine it with like more fantastical elements like sword fighting in that, it's just like, it's like Star Wars, bro. Like Star Wars is sci-fi, but lightsabers are one of the iconic things about Star Wars, and essentially those are swords, right? Even though they're, it's energy pulse. Like when you combine those elements, man, I love that stuff, right? That's what Star Wars did. Jedi Knights, they had when you got that whole medieval vibe, like fantasy vibe mixed in with sci-fi, I eat that stuff up. I think other people do too, but I personally, I eat that stuff up, because part of the thing was that, and this is, I'm sorry, I'm backtracking here all over the place, but I got these random thoughts coming out. So the thing about, especially when you have a guy like Zayko, right? So he's basically like you said, it's like a Hitler type, it's like a Mussolini type. It's like when you have this ultimate badass dictator, right, that runs roughshod, that doesn't care about execution, doesn't care about, he just worried about himself. Although he still has that, you can tell he still has caring for his old peeps, even though they're on the other side now, right? So when you have that, you always need to have, like, you can't make those people invincible. They have to have a foil. But what I love is when the technology that he's so hyping up turns against him. That's the stuff that I love. Like that's the stuff that makes it, you can't control that thing, man. You know what I mean? Like, you think you're gonna win this war because of it. He's all pumped up. He gives this big speech. He's telling them, "Yep, this is gonna be the difference in the war." Blah blah. And then the damn thing turns, right? So that's the stuff that, yeah, man, I love that. And that, like, so many superlatives, man. Dude, you outdid yourself, man. That, like, it was just, even just to take something simple like, again, now we're going back to the origins and of these guys as kids and the angst. You would have thought, you wouldn't have, even though you could see that he liked her too, they both liked her, you wouldn't have thought that Ray was going to end up with Jidd. You would have thought Zayko, right? Like, everything was just like, yeah, I loved it, man. I loved it. It was just really, really well done. It was fantastic. I was, like, blown away. It's got all those, like, I don't want to say, like, movie franchise elements, but it's got those elements, man. It's got those, like, you can see this playing out on the big screen. It's got those elements, those got those hooks, those, like, just like hooky, right? And you have that way of making people care about the characters and what happens to them. And one of the best things about your book, and this is what I love, and I hate to keep using Game of Thrones, is that when you set up characters that are going to be on opposing sides, but you make people care about both of them and what happens to both of them, that is the best possible scenario. So you care what happens, even though he's an idiot, because of, you look at Zayko and what he was, and a lot of people still, look at what he was, and they will still love him, and they will obviously love Jidd, and they'll want both of them to survive. They won't want them to kill each other, and they'll want their friendship as kids to still be intact. Like, they'll want that, but it seems unlikely because obviously, the way it's going, somebody's got to pay the price. Maybe one or both, but it's unlikely we'll survive. But because people are going to want both of them to survive, and that just makes it more compelling, and people are just more like invested, right? So it's awesome. Yeah,
And
I love it.
I'm really glad that you said that, because one of my biggest fears was like the idea that people would look at Zayko like the antagonist, whereas like, in reality, it's like specifically if you compare his actions when he was younger, like when they found the church and he convinces the guys to like go against the government essentially. That he to me, hopefully I wrote it this way, but like I tried to make it seem like he was actually an amazingly capable leader.
Yes, he was. You can see that.
Somehow, that got muddled. He has absolute power, and now he's over there yelling at everybody else's like incompetence. But if you do the math, a lot of the mistakes that he's complaining about, he did.
It's his own mistakes.
Exactly.
It's his own mistakes.
Which I did very purposely. It's like, he's yelling at his wardrobe assistant that he literally gave emotions to for no reason.
I love that. I love that too. I love that.
You know what I mean? And then he's yelling at his soldiers, and then he tells them, like, "Oh, what are you even doing here?" He goes like, "Oh, you asked us to do this specifically." He goes like, "Oh yeah, right."
Yeah.
And then someone asked him about some rule, and he was like, "Oh, who made that dumb up rule?
Yeah.
Who made that rule up? Oh, you did. Oh crap,
Yeah.
I did."
Yeah, I love those parts of it.
And he just never accepts his own like his own failure. Whereas a kid, he was not only 100% willing to do that, but just like could inspire, kids do the impossible. Who would think to drop a bomb in a clone factory when they're a group of 13 to 15-year-old kids? It's outrageous. And then he is able to do that, and then somehow I always wanted that to be kind of like oh, I wonder what happened in that time period. I wonder what it is that made him from here to there.
Yeah, and the thing about him too is like, and then you go back to the start when he was the one that got them into the alley and into the church. He was the one that essentially set up the whole plan. He orchestrated basically, them to safety, right? It was him. He was their leader through, and it was very much like, what I love about that juxtaposition was Jidd was still very much the technical geek guy that, like you watch those movies and read those books, there's always that guy, right? And you wouldn't think he's going to become a leader. He's just the sidekick. He's just the guy who's going to figure out the gadgets. He's just the guy who do this. But he ends up becoming a big time leader, and that's the other part that I loved, right? Like, I really like, you would have thought it would have been like more of a Haas, right? It would have been more Haas. It wasn't going to pose Zayko, even though Haas is very much set up as he's Jidd's buddy. He's got his back till death, as Yo says. Like you would have thought that it would have been something like Haas, right? More charismatic ladies man. Alice really loves him. Like, you would have thought it would have been him, if anybody, that would have been like that. But no, like I love it. Like I said, man, it's awesome. I could tell you a book for hours. It's awesome. It's awesome. I loved it.
Well, if something as a side note to that, so I think I'm trying to think. Oh, it was right before Jidd, like after they thought Haas died in Sector 5.
Yep.
Jidd flies out, and like they Jidd and Rhea have like that kind of like conversation of like, oh, it's like I was like, oh, you got to come back, and he was like, hey, listen, like you're the one that really runs all this and whatnot. I specifically put that in there as kind of like to show that in reality she was always Jidd's backbone.
Yes. Yes.
Know what I mean? Like the
Yeah,
thing
yeah.
that growth element that brought him from there to there was Rhea. Like it even shows it towards the end when he can't handle his emotions. Like his mom died and he just like can't
Yeah.
like cope with things anymore. Rhea's literally the one holding his hand,
Yeah.
making him breathe. Like she's the one that like just like basically walks him through it. And yeah, that builds up for very specific things later on, and very specifically with things with what happened with Haas as well, because you know their whole that whole little triangle that they have is kind of like
Yeah, and I love that. Like I got that impression because as soon as Haas reappeared, you future forward, and then when Jidd gave his speech and he fainted, I that whole surrounding that part of the book, that's when I read it, saw that like for Jidd it's all about the people who surround him, whereas Zayko's put himself on an island, right? So Jidd's strength is his peeps, right? But Zayko's thinks he has to rely on himself. He's the only one that knows what he's doing, so he has to But Jidd's about his peeps, so that is very much how they're contrasted, right? For me, and like I said, the thing about your book too is that, and I forgot to mention this, is that and this is probably the reason what messed you up at the end. So if you could fool yourself into thinking that you set these two people up that are very dissimilar but yet similar in some ways, because they both have leadership qualities, but one is overt and one, is the upfront leader just here, and one is a leader by collaboration but is thrust into the role. He has a leadership thrust on him, right? And the other guy takes it, right? And but they still have some similarities, right? And what I think, so going back to that whole my confusion between prologue and end of the book. So in the beginning, it's like, okay, well, like what's up? Zayko's adrift in space. He got like ejected, like he got abandoned, set adrift, like what? Because you just start the book, you don't know what happened, right? So you just think, okay, this guy, he's gonna die. He's drifting in space. Like, what happened? Did he, because obviously he was a military leader, as a dictator. Like, did his people rebel against him? Did he get into an accident? It was war? Did it, part of the spaceship blow up? And what happened, right? But if you really read the beginning and the beginning and the end of the book, now we're talking about Jidd. You can almost see how there's that parallel between Zidd's thoughts and reflection about his life and he's gonna die, and what happened to Zidd. So it's like, dude, you set it up like it was wild. You set it up perfectly. So perfectly, the fact that for a minute I fooled myself. It's my own incompetence, but I fooled myself in thinking, wait a minute. So then after you said like no, when you messaged me like no, that wasn't Zayko. I'm like, what? And because I had been, you read so fast, like so I had to go back and I reread your whole book, bro. I reread the whole thing so that I could get it, like, because it needs to be straight in my mind. Like I need to see it play out in my mind the way, it was supposed to, for me to like, it was wild. It was wild, man. It was wild.